Huska Castle, a stone plug in the gates of hell. When we think of classic medieval European architecture, the overwhelming majority of fortresses were built with a clear and practical purpose: to protect a feudal lord, control trade routes, and defend against external enemies. Yet deep within the dense, legend-shrouded forests of northern Bohemia, just a few dozen miles from modern-day Prague, stands a structure whose very design defies logic and leaves historians and architects perplexed. Huska Castle, constructed in the first half of the 13th century by order of the Bohemian elite, is a chilling architectural anomaly. It is located far from any water source, guards no borders, holds no strategic advantage, and most disturbingly, its defensive features, thick walls and arrow slits, face inward toward a small inner courtyard, as if the garrison expected an assault, not from the surrounding forest, but from within its own walls. This inverted architecture gains its terrifying meaning when we turn to old Czech chronicles, which claim the castle was never meant for human habitation. According to historical accounts, long before the first stone was laid, a massive, seemingly bottomless chasm split the rocky hilltop, and from its darkness, grotesque hybrid creatures and shadowy winged beings emerged at night to attack livestock and travelers. To test the depth of this abyss, feared as a gateway to hell, Bohemian rulers reportedly offered a condemned prisoner a pardon if he would descend into the pit on a rope and describe what lay below. Within minutes of entering the darkness, the man began screaming in primal terror, and when guards pulled him back up, they were horrified to see that his hair had turned white, his face had aged, and his mind had shattered from what he had witnessed, leading to his death soon after. Realizing they faced something beyond comprehension, the rulers built a heavy stone chapel directly over the chasm to seal it, and then constructed the surrounding castle as a massive architectural plug, with no lower-level entrances or windows. Standing before its darkened walls today, one cannot shake the suffocating thought that this fortress was not built to keep enemies out, but to keep something unspeakable trapped beneath the earth. Tiffauges Castle, the alchemical slaughter of a national hero. When we reverently turn the yellowed pages of France's heroic chronicles from the 100 Years' War, the name of Marshal Gilles de Rais appears beside the radiant saintly image of Joan of Arc, shining in armor as an unquestioned national hero whose courage and loyalty to the crown seem beyond doubt. Yet history written in palace squares prefers to remain silent about what happened after this immensely wealthy and powerful aristocrat withdrew from public life and retreated to his private stronghold, transforming the massive fortress of Tiffauges into what would become one of the most horrifying death factories of medieval Europe. The towering castle, bristling with spires and surrounded by deep moats, was not rebuilt to defend against the English, but to conceal its master's descent into black magic, forbidden alchemy, and necromancy. Possessing a fortune rivaling that of the French king, Gilles de Rais filled his labyrinthine halls with charlatans, renegade sorcerers, excommunicated priests, and alchemists from across Europe, turning Tiffauges into a sovereign occult enclave. Beneath the heavy oak floors of his grand chambers, furnaces burned continuously, while in lightless dungeons he allegedly performed grotesque rituals to summon a demon named Baron, as servants abducted hundreds of peasant children whose lives were sacrificed in secret rooms hidden behind thick stone walls. Villagers living in the castle's shadow whispered of black smoke rising at night and of those who entered its gates never returning, yet fear of noble power kept them silent until the scale of disappearances forced church authorities, including the Bishop of Nantes, to intervene. When the investigation finally pierced the fortress's walls, the legend of the hero shattered. Looking at the ruined towers of Tiffauges today, one is confronted with a chilling truth. The most terrifying monsters in history do not crawl from forests or emerge from hell. They wear silk, wield absolute authority, fund the cutting-edge experiments of their age, and build perfect walls behind which their madness can flourish unchecked. The Hellfire Caves, the subterranean temple of vice of the British elite. When we look back at 18th century British Enlightenment society, we tend to picture powdered gentlemen debating empire, economics, and morality in the bright halls of Parliament. Yet behind that polished facade lay a darkness so profound that England's political elite literally carved it into the earth. Beneath the green hill of the respectable West Wycombe estate in Buckinghamshire stretches a vast network of chalk tunnels known as the Hellfire Caves, excavated by order of Sir Francis Dashwood, Chancellor of the Exchequer and one of the most powerful men in Britain. Possessing immense wealth and disdain for conventional morality, Dashwood hired hundreds of laborers to carve a labyrinthine underground complex designed not for storage or defense, but as a secret theatrical stage for an exclusive order whose members allegedly included prime ministers, nobles, admirals, artists, and even Benjamin Franklin. Within these acoustically isolated chambers, far from public scrutiny, they held mock religious ceremonies, pagan rituals, and indulgent gatherings hidden beneath layers of aristocratic respectability. The layout itself forms a symbolic descent into the underworld, culminating in a subterranean chamber reached by crossing a dark underground stream called the River Styx. Directly beneath a village church stood the inner temple, an act of architectural irony that placed clandestine rituals beneath unsuspecting worshippers above. Standing before this carved entrance, one confronts a stark truth. The empire that preached order and morality to the world was shaped in part by men who sought liberation, not in the light of reason, but in the shadows of their own carefully constructed underworld. Wewelsburg Castle, the Black Sun, and the occult temple of the SS. When we examine the bureaucratic machinery of the Third Reich, we often focus on Berlin's offices or the barbed wire of concentration camps. Yet the ideological core of that regime was nurtured in the provincial quiet of Wewelsburg Castle. In 1934, Heinrich Himmler, obsessed with Germanic mysticism and Arthurian legend, leased the triangular medieval castle and envisioned it as a spiritual center for the SS. To realize this vision, forced labor from the nearby Niederhagen concentration camp was used to expand and rebuild the structure, embedding suffering into its very stone. The centerpiece became the Obergruppenführersaal, a circular hall intended for 12 high-ranking SS officers, symbolically mirroring the Knights of the Round Table. Set into the marble floor is the mosaic known as the Black Sun, a dark radial symbol that served as a focal point for ideological ritual and myth-making. Beneath this hall lies a circular crypt designed as a ceremonial chamber, where an eternal flame was planned to burn at its center. The architecture amplified even the faintest whisper into a resonant echo, creating an atmosphere intended to inspire awe and submission. Within these carefully constructed spaces, ideology was elevated into ritual, and architecture became a tool of myth and power. Standing in those silent chambers today, one is reminded how architecture can be shaped not only by ambition, but by belief systems that seek to transform political authority into something resembling a sacred order. The Abbey of Thelema, a temple of vice and shattered souls in Sicily. When we picture the sun-drenched landscapes of Sicily, washed in Mediterranean light and sea breeze, we imagine quiet fishing villages and fragrant citrus groves. Yet it was this isolated paradise that one of the 20th century's most notorious occultists chose to build his personal spiritual experiment. In 1920, the controversial British mystic Aleister Crowley rented a modest villa in the town of Cefalù and transformed it into what he called the Abbey of Thelema, a communal retreat centered around his philosophy, summarized in the phrase, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Unlike fortresses of stone, this house functioned as a psychological stronghold, attracting aristocrats, artists, and seekers from across Europe who placed their trust, finances, and personal autonomy under Crowley's charismatic leadership. The true intensity of the Abbey lay not in physical confinement, but in its immersive environment. Crowley painted the walls of his personal chamber, later known as the Room of Nightmares, with symbolic, mythological, and esoteric imagery drawn from his spiritual system. Initiates were encouraged to confront their fears and limitations through ritual practices, meditation, and altered states of consciousness, experiences that some described as transformative, while others found destabilizing. Accounts from former members speak of demanding ceremonies, unconventional spiritual exercises, and a communal lifestyle that blurred boundaries between mysticism and excess. The community's reputation suffered greatly after the death of a British follower, Raoul Loveday, in 1923, an event that sparked sensational media coverage across Europe. The resulting scandal led Italian authorities under Benito Mussolini to expel Crowley from the country, and the villa was abandoned, gradually falling into ruin. Today, the remains of the Abbey of Thelema stand weathered and overgrown, fragments of faded murals still visible beneath cracked plaster. The site endures as a cautionary symbol of how charisma, ideology, and unrestrained experimentation can reshape a place, and the lives of those drawn to it. Standing before those crumbling walls, one is reminded that powerful belief systems, when detached from restraint and responsibility, can transform even an ordinary house into a space charged with psychological intensity and historical controversy. The Winchester House, a mad labyrinth built to escape ghosts. When we think of the immense fortunes amassed during America's 19th century industrial boom, we picture grand, symmetrical mansions built by railroad tycoons and steel magnates. Yet in California's Santa Clara Valley stands an architectural anomaly unlike any other, the Winchester House, a sprawling wooden labyrinth born not of calculated design, but of grief, superstition, and fear. It was commissioned by Sarah Winchester, widow of William Wirt Winchester and heir to the Winchester repeating arms fortune, the company whose rifles became iconic in the expansion of the American West. After the deaths of her infant daughter and later her husband, Sarah inherited a vast fortune and steady income. According to popular legend, she sought guidance from a spiritualist who warned her that she was haunted by the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles, and that continuous construction was the only way to delay her own death. Whether driven by belief, grief, or a desire for distraction, Sarah moved to California and began an expansion that would continue for nearly 38 years. Construction reportedly proceeded day and night, guided less by formal blueprints than by her evolving instructions. The result was a bewildering maze of staircases that led to ceilings, doors that open into walls, hallways that twist back upon themselves, and rooms added seemingly without plan. The house grew into a vast network of corridors, hidden passages, and oddly placed windows, reflecting a structure shaped by constant revision rather than architectural symmetry. Sarah was said to favor the number 13, incorporating it into windows, steps, and decorative details, adding yet another layer of symbolism to the design. When Sarah Winchester died in 1922, construction stopped almost immediately, leaving behind not a completed palace, but a sprawling, unfinished monument to one woman's complex inner world. Today, the Winchester Mystery House stands as a cultural curiosity, part Victorian innovation, part legend, its eccentric design continuing to inspire fascination. Whether viewed as a product of superstition or as an extraordinary architectural experiment born from personal loss, it remains a powerful reminder of how fear, grief, and immense wealth can reshape physical space into something deeply symbolic and enduring. The Initiation Well, an inverted tower descending into the abyss. When we study the architectural ambitions of the world's elite, we usually see an arrogant drive upward. Kings building towers atop cliffs, corporations competing to pierce the clouds with steel and glass, believing that height itself grants superiority. Yet, in the mist-covered hills of Sintra, Portugal, stands a structure that defies this upward obsession. At the beginning of the 20th century, the wealthy and eccentric Antonio Augusto Carvalho Monteiro purchased the Quinta da Regaleira estate and transformed it into a landscape of symbolism and hidden meaning. Instead of constructing a towering monument to the sky, he directed his vision downward, creating what is now known as the Initiation Well, a 27-meter-deep cylindrical shaft resembling an inverted tower descending into the earth. The well was never intended to draw water. Its spiral staircase, descending in 9 levels, has often been interpreted as an allegorical reference to Dante Alighieri's 9 circles of hell. The space is believed to have been used for symbolic initiation ceremonies associated with esoteric traditions, such as Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism, movements that fascinated European intellectual circles of the time. Participants would descend the winding stone steps, moving from sunlight into shadow, enacting a ritual journey meant to represent transformation, introspection, or spiritual rebirth. At the base of the well lies a stone inlay featuring a cross associated with the Knights Templar within a star-shaped design, reinforcing the estate's layered symbolic program. From there, a network of underground tunnels leads outward, guiding visitors through darkness before emerging again into daylight, a deliberate architectural metaphor for death and renewal. Standing at the edge of the moss-covered spiral today, one senses how power, wealth, and esoteric curiosity merged into physical form. The Initiation Well remains not a literal descent into hell, but a striking monument to humanity's enduring desire to confront mystery, reshape symbolism into stone, and ritualize the journey between light and shadow. Holmes' Murder Castle, a hotel of horror in the heart of a metropolis. In 1893, as millions flocked to Chicago's World's Fair to celebrate electric lights, industry, and the promise of modern civilization, a darker structure rose quietly on a busy city block. Behind the respectable facade of a commercial building stood what newspapers would later call the Murder Castle, designed and operated by H. Holmes, often cited as one of America's first documented serial killers. Unlike the sensational image that the nickname suggests, the building was in fact a mixed-use structure, with shops on the ground floor and rental rooms above. Yet, it became notorious because Holmes used its complex layout to commit fraud and, according to court records and testimony, multiple murders. Holmes frequently changed contractors during construction, leaving the interior partially unfinished and confusing in design. The upper floors reportedly contained windowless rooms, hidden passageways, staircases leading nowhere, and doors that opened into blank walls, features that later fueled public imagination. Some rooms were allegedly fitted with gas lines that Holmes could control, and trapdoors or chutes were said to connect certain areas to the basement below. There, investigators discovered evidence of medical equipment, chemicals, and a kiln, though many details reported in the press at the time were later exaggerated by sensational journalism. Holmes was ultimately arrested not for murder, but initially for insurance fraud, and later confessed to numerous killings, though historians still debate the exact number of victims. Looking back at the surviving blueprints and accounts, what remains most unsettling is not myth but method, the blending of charm, intelligence, and calculated planning within the framework of a rapidly modernizing city. The Murder Castle endures as a grim reminder that the most dangerous threats are not always hidden in remote ruins or ancient legends. They can emerge in the very heart of progress, wearing a polite smile and offering a key to a comfortable room from which some guests would never return. Coral Castle, the anti-gravity obsession of a solitary builder. When we stand before the Great Pyramids of Egypt or gaze at the massive stones of Stonehenge, we reassure ourselves that such feats were accomplished by vast labor forces over decades. Yet in Florida stands a structure that challenges that comforting logic. In the early 20th century, Latvian immigrant Edward Leeds Kalnin, working largely alone and without modern heavy machinery, carved, moved, and assembled more than 1,100 tons of coral limestone to create what is now known as Coral Castle. Slight in build and intensely private, Leeds Kalnin devoted years to constructing the site, which he described as a monument to a lost love he called his Sweet 16. The project's scale and the apparent simplicity of the tools he used have long fueled speculation. Among its most famous features is a 9-ton revolving coral gate, so precisely balanced on a central pivot that it once could be opened with minimal effort. Over time, stories emerged from curious neighbors who claimed to have seen massive stones moving at night, though such accounts remain anecdotal. Leeds Kalnin himself offered enigmatic explanations, speaking of understanding ancient building techniques and the forces of magnetism, but he never revealed detailed methods. After his death, when the Great Coral Gate later malfunctioned, modern engineers used cranes and equipment to repair it, reinforcing both the site's engineering intrigue and its enduring mystique. Today, Coral Castle stands beneath the Florida sky as both an engineering curiosity and a testament to personal obsession. Whether interpreted as a triumph of leverage and ingenuity or as an unsolved mechanical puzzle, it continues to inspire fascination. The monument reminds us that determination, patience, and unconventional thinking can reshape massive blocks of stone, and that sometimes the most enduring mysteries arise not from ancient civilizations, but from a single driven individual working in quiet solitude. The Blue Temple on the island, a modern ziggurat for the untouchable. When we trace the dark evolution of architectural excess, from medieval dungeons to towering Gothic fortresses, we like to believe that such monuments to secrecy and power belong to a distant, less enlightened past. Yet, one of the most disturbing modern examples emerged not in shadowy ruins, but beneath the bright tropical sun of the 21st century. On Little St. James, a private Caribbean island once owned by financier Jeffrey Epstein, investigators and journalists focused attention on an unusual blue and white structure topped with a gold dome, often referred to as the Blue Temple. Officially described in planning documents as a music pavilion, the building's striking appearance and restricted access fueled years of speculation. The structure featured decorative elements such as statues and ornamental detailing that stood out sharply against the island's landscape. Its prominent doors, widely photographed, were later revealed to be non-functional, adding to public curiosity about the building's purpose. Following criminal investigations into Epstein's activities, media reports and court filings raised questions about the presence of surveillance systems, underground rooms, and restricted areas across the island property. While many details remain the subject of legal proceedings and journalistic inquiry, the site has become emblematic of how wealth and influence can create insulated environments beyond ordinary scrutiny. Today, the abandoned buildings on the island stand as a stark reminder that power in the modern age no longer hides exclusively in darkness. It often operates in plain sight, wrapped in luxury, protected by legal teams, and buffered by private security. Architecture, in such cases, becomes more than shelter. It becomes a symbol of isolation, control, and privilege. Whether interpreted as a cautionary tale about unchecked authority or as a chapter in an ongoing legal reckoning, the island's structures have entered contemporary cultural memory as monuments to an era when secrecy and status converged under the tropical sun. Architecture is often called frozen music. At times, however, it can also be frozen ambition, solidified in stone and concrete, reflecting fear, power, and the desire to control what lies beyond public view. Some walls are built not merely to keep others out, but to ensure that what happens inside remains unseen.